in this corner of the world, where crime is almost non-existent, for innocent college students were stabbed to death in their beds, left us all with so many questions. Now, after more than 300 interviews, James Patterson and prize-winning journalist Vicky Ward finally have some answers. We know what it was like to live in Moscow, Idaho. On November 13, 2022, the day of the cold-blooded killings, we know what the local police and FBI did right, and what they did wrong. We've learned so much about the 4 heartbroken families, the Mogans, and we have the backstory for Bryan Kohberger, brilliant, grad student, loner, apparent, incel. Now you are the jury. The evidence is in. Let's start with Kaylee and Madison. On the night of November, these 2 close friends, both were home alone in the house at 1122 King Road, the so-called Grubs. Kaylee dated a guy named Jack, but he was out of town that weekend. Madison had just come home from a long trip, her first visit back to the Grub after a month away. She and Kylie had a lot of catching up to do. They went to the Grub late that afternoon, arriving around 4:40 p.m. A security camera captured their car. They parked, they came inside. There was no sign of forced entry. They apparently didn't lock the door behind them. At the Grub, Ethan and Xana, the couple living next door, heard gunshots. They thought it was fireworks. In the Moscow Police Department report, they would later write, quote, "We heard what sounded like 4 to 6 gunshots. At the time, we assumed they were fireworks." Across the street, a resident on campus wrote, quote, "I woke up due to hearing what sounded like gunshots. I counted for distinct noises. I went back to sleep." Meanwhile, 8 miles away on the other side of town, 20-year-old Xana Kernodle and her roommate, 21-year-old Madison Morgan, were also home alone. Their father, Jeff, had dropped them off earlier that evening. On this night, the Grub, the place where Kaylee and Madison lived, was not a crime scene. It was a home filled with friends who were enjoying their Friday night, playing cards, watching TV, laughing. They had no idea a killer was lurking outside. Let's go back to the Grub. Madison and Kaylee were inside when a white sedan drove past. One of the passengers in the car saw them through the window and yelled something, but it's not clear what. But Madison mouthed back, "I don't know what." According to the police report, then the white car drove off. Later, it would be identified as a Hyundai Elantra, the same car driven by Bryan Kohberger. Just before 6 p.m., someone opened the back door of the Grubs and let themselves in. That person was not Madison or Kay. It was Kaylee's boyfriend, Jack, who arrived from out of town. He used a key. Apparently, he let himself in because there was no sign of forced entry. The roommates hadn't locked the door. Jack went to the kitchen to get a beer. When he came back, he saw his girlfriend Kaylee lying dead on the couch. According to the police report, Jack screamed. He called 911. He was barefoot, shirtless, covered in blood. As he ran next door to get help, he told the neighbor, quote, "Help me, someone stabbed Kaylee and Madison." He performed CPR on Kaylee until paramedics arrived, but she was already gone. Madison was also dead. When officers arrived at the Grub, they found Jack performing mouth-to-nose resuscitation on Kaylee. By the time they got there, it was too late. He was then taken into custody. As officers rushed into the house, they noticed blood on the walls and ceiling. This was not a robbery. Someone had methodically stabbed Kaylee and Madison to death. Meanwhile, 8 miles away on the other side of town, 20-year-old Xana Kernodle and her roommate 21-year-old Madison Morgan were also home alone. Their father, Jeff, had dropped them off earlier that evening. He would later tell investigators he never received a call that night from either of his daughters, which was unusual. Like always, they had their phones with them. So at around 6:15, he tried calling again. No answer. He tried again at 6:20. Still no answer. Meanwhile, 21-year-old Ethan Chapin and his friend 20-year-old Madison Morgan were walking home from the Grub. They stopped by the house to drop something off. As they approached the front door, they heard what they thought were screams coming from inside. Ethan knocked. No answer. Thinking it was weird, they walked around back. They could see through a window into the kitchen. There was blood everywhere. Glass was shattered on the floor. Furniture was overturned. Ethan looked around to see if anyone was outside. No one was. He and Madison ran away. By the time the police arrived, it was too late. Inside the house on King Road, Kaylee and Madison had been stabbed to death. At the house on Walnut Street, Ethan and Xana had also been stabbed to death. The killer had used one of the knives from Xana's kitchen block, leaving it in her fruit basket. How did he get in? He had jimmied open a window. It was barely ajar when the police arrived. How did he get from one house to the other? Bryan Kohberger is a very smart guy, maybe even genius. He earned excellent grades in high school. He graduated with honors from DeSales University with a degree in criminal justice. He scored a perfect 32 on his act. He had a nearly identical score on the GAR. He was accepted into 3 different PhD programs. He was brilliant, but he was also a loner. His classmates at DeSales describe him as strange and awkward, and he was obsessed with true crime. His LinkedIn page lists his favorite shows: Criminal Minds, CSI, Law & Order, Forensic Files. The first 48, he was fascinated by killers and their victims. That was part 1. Now it's time for part 2. Click here to watch part 2 now.